Hey, guess what, guys? Pause. It is jamplay.com. It is Dave Brown. It is a new venue. Because why not? You got to change it up. Keep it fresh. It is the saddest week of all when it comes to Jam of the Week because this is the final week. It is week 8. This is Swingin a Blues. And today we're just, it's a Jam of the Week, like I probably already said. And the concept, for those of you who are just joining us, you're a little late, it's the last episode. But the concept is that, I don't know, let's say you wanted to play with somebody, jam with some buddies, and somebody calls a chord progression. And then you go, okay, cool, but like, what do I do over it? This is that scenario. I am trying to replicate what you would do in the wild if the wild was still a thing and people could, get together and hang and play tunes together. You could social distance jam. I'm sure that's a thing. Haven't really tried it yet. I guess a little bit. Anyway, we're swinging a blues in the key of G. And swinging implying it's a little jazzier than just a straight ahead blues, or more of a rock feel, which is good. You know, the whole idea of this course is I wanted to give you a variety of genres. So we've been branching out, and finally we're at the jazz. Okay, so we're gonna start off like we always do with some basic options. And again, if you're just joining us, as we progress, basically what happens is it gets a little more difficult, so that, you know, if you've never played anything before, you can get this going. You can play, never played anything before. That was vague. If you're a beginner, that's a much better way to represent this. Beginner, intermediate, we got some options for you. If you're intermediate, we got even more options for you. And then advanced, we got some licks. We'll throw them in. We'll talk about scale options and what you could play over it. Anybody has any questions, we got Roy Smin in the helm over here, so he's happy to field those questions for you and then write them to me via Skype, and then I will tell them the answer to you with my mouth. So, I think that was a pretty awesome intro right there. That pretty much covers everything I wanted to cover. So, that being said, let's get started. Again, we've got a G blues, and we're going to go to rhythm option number 1. And I'm going to give you a couple different options. But basically, when you're comping dominant 7 chords, comping meaning playing the chords to a song, it's kind of, you know, you always want to have a couple options. You don't want to be just stuck playing the same basic voicings, especially because it's, in jazz, like there needs to be some communication going on. So it's good to be able to do that. Going to give you plenty of options today. But if you were just basic big old Mel Bay option kind of chords would be to, you could do this, right? So this is your basic bar chord, right, for a G chord. So E-shaped B, G chord, okay? You take your pinky off and all of a sudden it becomes dominant 7, okay? Now that's an option, but I'm going to give you the slightly jazzier version, slightly mellower version of that. So instead of doing this, essentially what we're going to do, we're going to play all these same notes. We're just going to eliminate the 5th string, but in order to do that, we're going to skip over it. So what I want you to do is put your first finger on the 6th string, 3rd fret. Middle finger is going on the 3rd fret of the 4th string. Ring finger on the 2nd string, 3rd fret. And then pinky on the 3rd string, 4th fret. So versus, it's just a little mellower. Got my jazz pick today. We're going nice and thick. 2-pointer that helps the tone. There's several things, but we're not really worried about tone and everything today. You know, this obviously I want to give you the elements. If you're trying to do it more authentically, you would want to worry about tone. You'd want to worry about picks, all that fun stuff. But really, this is just an excuse to understand how to approach a progression. So it's not the end of the world if it's completely authentic. But you should strive for better, always. So, now when going to, so that's your 6-string root basic option for a dominant 7 chord. So you can also, when you go to the 5th string root, you have a couple different options. What I wrote out was a dominant 9 chord, but essentially it's all based off of this A shape, right? that would be your 4 chord if you're doing a 1-4-5. That's all blues is. So that would be an option for a dominant 7. So instead of barring your ring finger, you just put your ring finger up to just on the 4th string, barring your first finger across the 3rd fret completely. Pinky grabs that 5th fret on the 2nd string. That's an option too. So, but what I'm going to recommend is one of my more favorite options. Middle finger on that 3rd fret of the 5th string. First finger on the 2nd finger. What? First finger on the 2nd finger? Doesn't even make sense. First finger on the 2nd fret of the 4th string. Ring finger is going to bar those bottom 3 strings. So 3rd fret on the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd string. So that's a really difficult for some people who have never made it. You just got to make sure the most important thing is really arching your middle finger. You don't want it to collapse because that becomes a dominant 7 sus4 9. What? Yeah. It's a dominant sus4 9 chord kind of a thing. However you want to refer to it. Not a cool chord, but not the chord we're going for. Okay, so that's what we're going for right there. And then for the D, you just, your 5 chord's only a whole step away. So whatever option you use for your 5 chord, or for your can be just moved up a whole step for your 5 chord. Obviously, vice versa. So those are the 3 options I'm going to give you for these first 2 lines here in rhythm option number 1. However, if you wanted to, anytime I play this, you could totally play this. Anytime I play this, you could totally play that. You can play with this, you could play with that. Okay, so options. We're going to cover some more that aren't even on the paper too, just because I want to give you all the things, because that's how my brain works. But it's probably better not to overload you. So the basic blues form, this is about as simple as it gets. We're not even going to go to a quick 4 chord. So it's going to be 4 bars of G. And what we're going to do is like the Freddie Green chunk thing. So obviously, you can get really creative with some of the, I don't know, comping rhythm. That's important too. But there is literally so much we could talk about over like swinging a blues that I just don't want to go. I'll go down a rabbit hole and then I'll lose you, and that's not good. So we're going to keep the rhythm really simple today of just comping basic quarter notes. And so technically it's just written, something like that. But if you notice, it's tempting to put like a little hiccup, a little ghost note scrape right before it at the beginning of each measure. So technically at the end of the previous measure. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's a really strong hit on 1, and then you kind of back off. And it's really steady. It's just it's more of like a rhythm section thing, like bass player, walking bass line. Yeah, and that's it. So we're gonna walk through it. It's gonna be 4 bars of G7. We'll go to C for 2 bars because that's what it does in a blues. And then we'll go back to our G7 chord. And then finally, the turnaround is you go to the D9 for a bar, you go to C9 for a bar, and then you're going to go to G7 for a bar, and then I give you a D7 sharp 9. So if we go back to that D9, it's basically that, but you're going to add your pinky to the 6th fret of the 2nd string. Okay? That's just a great chord. Some of you might know it as a Hendrix chord. It's just a funky chord. So, good options. You could just play a regular D9 to there too. Even kind of switch back and forth, but again, we're keeping it simple. So I'm gonna play through it with the backing track, and then we'll talk about some more options. We'll just keep these options coming. 1, 2. C9, G7, back to D9. Going to our 4 chord C9, here we go. turn around. Turn around. I guess we can do it. I probably should have kept it going so you can play along a little longer. So let's do that again. We'll just take a quick little break. I'll start it again. I'll play it for like, since I already stopped, I'll give you some more options, and you can start exploring more options if you like. But yeah, I'll play through it again. But about halfway through the track, I'll play through the whole track this next time. And about halfway through the track, where you can kind of, I'm going to move up to the upper register and kind of show you. So basically what you have is when you have a 1-4-5, if you're on your 1 chord and on the 6th string, your 4 chord is directly across on the 5th string, and the 5 chord again is up a whole step from the 4 chord. So when you reverse the roles and put the 1 chord on the 5th string, so like for instance A, B, C, D, E, F, G up at the 10th fret, let's say you want to grab that G chord. Instead of down here, you can grab G9 up here, right? And then when you go to, you got your C chord here at the 8th fret and your D chord at the 10th fret. So you could also go. Okay, so I'm going to go back. I'm going to play rhythm option number 1 for a couple minutes, just so you guys can play along a little more. And then we'll go up I'll move up the octaves so you can either continue to play down where I was playing, or you can explore the reverse roll up at the 10th fret-ish area. Who's ready? This guy. 1, 2, 3, 4. More time on this side, and then I'll bring it up. sometimes it's tempting to put that quick 4 in there, you know what I'm saying? Like there. Sick, yo. Okay, so that is D7 up front, 1 chord for 4 bars. Traditionally speaking, you'll find a 4 chord on bar 2, and it sounds great. But this track was kept a little simple. It's not a requirement. You don't even have to go to the 5 chord at the end on bar 2. Keep it on G7 too. That's an option. That's even simpler. But that's the basic gist of what you could do. So you can always approach a chord by a half step either above or below. Traditionally below, but half step above, especially when going to the 4 chord from above. So like either way, it totally works. It's the same concept. A lot of bass players do it too. It's essentially just approaching the chord chromatically. It's nothing crazy, nothing too crazy. So yeah, that's the idea for if you were to just wanted to play a jazzy version of blues and you don't know too much and you just got a couple chords in your hands. There you go. Now, moving on to 7th chord inversions. We're not going to go crazy overboard with this today. But again, like I was saying, it's nice to create a little bit of a dialogue. And if you are limited, you can't say much. I mean, you can already do, like, you know, I could, 1, 2, 3, 4. You know, you can combine the 2 options that I gave you too. That's already a start in the right direction to expanding upon what we have literally already done. Plus approaching chords by half step, all of a sudden now it sounds like you can kind of comp a blues, which is great. That's what we're going for. But let's say you wanted to get some cool voice leading going because you're a nerd like me and then you think it sounds cool. Well, you might need to know some 7th chord inversions. Now, I'm going to teach them to you, and I will show you different options of how they line up, which you can then practice on your own. But we won't go crazy overboard on it, like I said. We're just going to practice a very specific option that I give you. But really, the possibilities are endless with something like this. And that's what makes it fun, is you can, you know, bring it down the neck. You can bring it up the neck if it's starting to get excited. The band's going a little crazier. Or if you hear, you know, whoever's soloing play a specific note, you know, you can try and support. You know what I'm saying? It's all about support. So let's take a look at the root, 1st inversion, 2nd inversion, 3rd inversion of a G7 chord. So what that means is inversions seems crazy, but if you had a piano, it would be way easier to explain. For instance, the G7 chord is G, B, D. What? I'm not a finger tapper. See? I already saw it. There it is. There's your flat 7 at the 10th fret. That's an F before you get back to the root. So those are the 4 notes in a G7 chord. And a G7 chord, if you were to literally just go know if I can even get this. The way the guitar is set up, it's not conducive to playing a very straight ahead G7 chord. So what you have to do is you break up the notes and you jumble, but that's what you got to do, and that's what we're going to do. So instead of that, a root position, which means when it says root position, it just means the name of the chord's the lowest note. So if this is a G7 chord, here's a G7. Since there's 4 notes, we're going to need 4 strings, okay? So this voicing is going to go root, 5th, flat 7th, 3rd, okay? And essentially what it is, it's just a D shape, if anybody knows your cage thing, but it's like a D7. So it's like doing a D7, which is literally what you could do for D7. Getting ahead of myself. So, anyway, that would be the root position, okay? Then if you go up 2 whole steps and replace your first finger with your middle finger, then it's going to go middle finger, ring finger. Oh, I didn't even tell you your fingers earlier. I'm sure you picked up on it, but just in case. Index, ring, middle, pinky. Then you're going to go to your middle finger on the 4th string, ring finger on the 10th fret. So middle finger on the 9th fret of the 4th string, ring finger on the 10th fret of the 3rd string, first finger on the 8th fret of the 2nd string, and then pinky on the 10th fret of the 1st string, okay? That is first inversion, and essentially what that is, like if you did it down here at the 2nd fret, it's basically a C shape, and I'm sure some of you made like a C7 chord. That's an option too. It's basically that C9 at that point, you know, you're so close, but instead of playing this note here, you just play that note. So for a G7, that's up at the 9th fret with your middle finger on the 9th fret, or 8 to 10, depends on how you like to think of it. I tend to think about whatever notes on the 4th string. So you got root, and then you're kind of, basically your ring finger and your pinky can stay down. They're on the exact same frets, the same strings. Well, not same frets, same strings. And you're just reversing the rolls of your first and middle finger. So that's a good exercise right there, just to get a little limber. Okay. Then after that, again, there's a couple of different ways you can think about it. Sometimes it's easier to think about the negative space in between. So for instance, my top fret is the 10th fret. I'm going to kind of picture the negative space as the 11th fret, and then we're going to go up to the 12th fret. So it is a big jump, but technically you're only skipping over the 11th fret. You know, so in that case, it's a little easier to approach. Okay, and so this one's pretty straightforward. You're gonna just bar your first finger across all 4 strings at the 12th fret, but also put your middle finger down on the 13th fret. So that is second inversion. And so, yeah, back to the explanation of inversions that I totally abandoned. When the name of the chord is in the bass, it's root position. When the 3rd of the chord, or 1, 3, 5, flat 7. So when the 3rd of the chord's in the bass, it's first inversion. Okay, and when the 5 of the chord is in the bass, it's second inversion. Okay, and this second inversion is basically, you know, you can think of it like the A shape, and then like barring your ring finger completely and ending your pinky. You know, that's. It's an option. So that's how you can kind of think about it. And I'm referencing these shapes just so unless you've done these before, you're probably going to get lost. So if you recognize any of these shapes, like this A shape right here, you can think of it just as part of that. And hopefully that helps stick a little better. Or you can literally just memorize what we're about to go through. That's fine too. Nobody's holding you accountable. There's no test, man. Except for life. Life's a test. 2020 is a test. Can I get an amen? Okay, so we're going up to the 15th fret for first inversion. Just kidding. Third inversion. This is part of that E shape. So it's probably easier to think of it like that. But again, you're just barring the 15th fret and then putting your middle finger down on the 16th fret of the 3rd string. Again, this is what we have at the 3rd fret down here. 3rd fret and middle finger on the 4th fret. It's basically that big old E shape. We're just kind of condensing it a little bit. And, you know, whether you're doing 7th chord inversions, you're doing triad inversions, both of them are, you know, they tend to substitute bigger, bulkier voicings. And sometimes those tend to be a little, especially if that's all you know and you go to a jam and you're just kind of going to town, like playing, like nobody wants to hear that. Player, and some, you know, if you're playing these triad inversions or 7-chord inversions, are a great way to kind of subtly imply the harmony but not dominate the soundscape. Okay? Yeah. That being said, let's go over the next 4 measures after those first 3 measures. Are just going to line up the options, okay? So eventually when you get good at these, like in rhythm option number 2, we're going to totally go through it and kind of show you how it works in motion. Or if you listen to the backing track, a lot of what I'm doing with the comping is these inversions right here and this kind of voice leading, as well as just adding other notes from the scales around the chord voicings. There's a whole bunch of stuff. It's a lot of fun. Did I mention it's fun? I'm having fun. I don't know if that's coming across, but I am. So, yeah. So if you were to like just keep it simple as you possibly could, the idea is you would take your 1 chords and you would think of each one as like a home base. And your job is to be as lazy as possible and not deviate from these too far. So for instance, if we're playing this G7, this 3rd inversion G7, our closest options, and it becomes vague, which makes it easier to transition between the different positions eventually. So, you know, you're on the G7 right here. Technically, that's right there, but we're going to keep it simple. We're going to keep the 4 chord and the 5 chord in the same shape. Now, hold up. We got some questions. What makes a chord sound bluesy? And how do you choose which inversion to use? So, both excellent question. What makes a chord sound bluesy is the flat 7. So if you just have, there's a couple of different things. The 9 helps too. That makes it a little more jazzier. But if you want like a traditional straight blues chord, like, so if you just have a regular triad, it's just 1, 3, 5, and then you're back to 1. But if you go 1, 3, 5, flat 7, that gives it the crunch. It gives you a tritone between the 3rd and the flat 7. Devil's interval, or the AKA the engine of the chord that drives motion. So that's in a nutshell. In the pull the curtain away, it's best I can kind of an answer. It's really that tritone that makes it bluesy. Flat 7, you know. How do you choose which inversion to use chord? It's a great question. Sometimes, so if some of you, I'm sure have, if you played just like regular basic chords, like maybe you've seen like a D/F sharp. So that's an inversion too. And that's when it tells you a very specific inversion. For instance, F sharp, D is the 3rd of the chord. So that's technically first inversion. If you have like a D chord over F sharp. So sometimes the song will tell you specifically what inversion they want by adding that /D/F sharp or C/G, that kind of a thing. And they all have a different flavor. They all have a different color. I find that like when it's really low in the bass, it really makes much more of a difference. And sometimes, like for instance, like, okay, so like a popular progression would be like, we won't say which modern person ripped off which Better Soul version of that, but I like to get it on, you know, Lil Marvin. So when you put that 1 chord over the 3, it creates a bass line. It tends to want to resolve to the root of the 4 chord. And so there's little things like that that can, you know, make a difference. But, you know, when we're getting up into these, it's really, they're all kind of, so it's funny, and it's a really good question, because it's making me think about it a little different. When the voicings are low, it really tends to, I tend to pick out the note that's on the bottom, which is the inversion kind of a thing. You know, that makes it, you know, here's a regular C, here's a C over G, which is a little darker, a little thicker, right? But when it's a 7-chord inversion or triad inversion, I'm almost, you know, it's a technicality. I'm calling this first inversion because it's got the 3rd and the bass, but I'm not thinking it's first inversion. I'm just think, I just know what the options are. And actually my brain, and your brain too, tends to pick out the note on top more so. So when it's a bigger, thicker voice, and I'm more concerned about what's in the bass, because it kind of gives it a certain flavor. Whereas when it's a inversion, I'm more picking out the melody note on top. And that's what voice leading refers to. So instead of just going, you know, where there's just like no love to it, you can get these really close, like you're closer to your chords, the next chord, than you realize. You know, you can really start to have a dialogue. So basically, for that question in this context, it was a really great question. I appreciate it. I would explore the heck out of these things and really see if you can start to create lines through it. You know, really, okay, I'm only going to move up. You would never think to do something like that if you were just playing those bulkier chords, and that it's a good mental challenge. It's a good sonic thing to bring to the table, put in the stew. You know what I'm saying? So great. Anyway, so now that I completely indulged both of those questions, so if we were to start with this third inversion here, we'll say the closest versions of inversions, would be your first inversion down here for C. Again, you're basically playing a C chord at that point. And then your 5 chord would be up a whole step right here, okay? And then, so you want to take the time to memorize that and just get really comfortable with it. So that's one option, right? If we have time, I'll go back and I'll play through the blues and just kind of do one group at a time. But that's, you know, we'll consider that extra credit if you want to do it yourself. Hopefully we'll have time. But it's not really, I just want to show you how these line up so you can really think about this later. Because it won't take long to memorize these shapes. And you don't have to put too much thought into it as long as you get the physical patterns memorized. Okay, so if we're gonna go, just kidding. If we got our root position here at the 5th fret, if we go to kind of collapse everything and go to second inversion right here, that'll work for C and that'll work for D. And so you just get this, you're surrounding this note. And that's the kind of stuff that you just don't see when you're doing these big clunky things, you know, it's not bad. So you got, so that's great. These are good for hybrid picking too, by the way, or just straight up finger picking. If you're on your first inversion, we'll say your closest 4 chord, first inversion for your root, your 1 chord. Your closest 4 chord will be the classic E shape or third inversion. And then if you're on your second inversion, we'll say your closest 4 and 5 chord or root position. But again, you'll start to see that it becomes like kind of vague in which direction you want to go. It's like a choose your own adventure. So once you're here, you got that leading. It wants to lead to the root. So it's like really tempting to resolve it there, even though you're technically trying to just stay in this area. Okay? So I would take the time to memorize those and play through them just like you're doing the big options, but you can just as easily choose those, and hopefully you get really good at them and you can mix and match them. That's what we're going to do in rhythm part number 2, okay? So rhythm part number 2. P.S. Sorry about the delay. We were 10 minutes behind, having some technical difficulties. Obviously, it's a new venue. Just trying to find a good Wi-Fi signal. So if we got our first inversion here, Sorry, I'm having trouble reading my writing. No, I'm just kidding. We're starting with root position. We're going to play that for 2 bars. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we're going to go up to the next inversion. So again, all you have to do is switch your middle and first finger, and then slide, your ring finger and your pinky up to the 10th fret. And that's a good thing to do too. So like to kind of just see if you can kind of go up and down for 1 chord, or even skip. Let's see if I can skip. That kind of thing, just to get really familiar with them, and then you can do it for C. Get where this is going. Okay. But that's not what we're doing, so I don't... Again, I'm really great at sidetracking both myself and you, and I don't know who loses more. Hopefully we all win. If we lose so hard that we win, we'll go with that. So you're going to go up to your first inversion, and then you're even going to go even farther to the second inversion. So the first 2 bars are just going to be your root position. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then at that point, this note's going to want to resolve to the 3rd of your 4 chord, right? So your root position C chord's right here. So it goes... And then we'll give you another option. We'll go back to 3rd inversion. And then this right here will go up to 1st inversion. So let's just review that really quick. So it's going... Okay, so hopefully, some of you might need to take the time to just memorize exactly how to make these shapes before you can hang with this, but I'm not using anything else besides these 4 shapes. You got root position, you got 1st inversion, you got 2nd inversion, and you got 3rd inversion. So again, at this point, this 2nd inversion for your 1 chord, which is basically an A shape at that point, wants to resolve to root position for your 4 chord. And you go back to the 3rd inversion, and then we're going to go up to 1st inversion before we go back to root position. Okay, so let's review all of that now. So that brings us to the 2nd measure through that 2nd line there, technically bar 8. So you're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's do it again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Just kidding. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. So again, back to that question of like, when do you use an inversion? Again, there's really no rules, but again, that note really, who's with me? It totally resolves to that 3rd of the 4 chord. So there are some things to think about, and hopefully you don't have to really think too hard, that your ear will kind of tell you. Again, you can go up at that point. It's not going to sound bad, but ideally what you would do is choose another really good exercise, not to get too far out of the way, but choose a 1 chord as a home base again, but be able to find the 4 chord option above and below that, as well as your 5 chord option above and below that, so you can hear the note on top and kind of really start to train your ear. So it'd be like... Anyway. So back to what I'm actually trying to teach you. In bar 9, we're going to go to 1st inversion down here at the 4th fret. Middle finger on the 4th fret, technically. And this is where it's going to get nice, like what I was talking about before. I'm going to make you walk up only to the right. So we're only going up the strings. So if we're going D7, we got to go to C7. And our closest option would be 2nd inversion. And that's going to want to resolve to the 1 root position for your 1 chord. And then you can have a 5 chord one more time. So you would do 2nd inversion again. And then at this point, if we're going to bring it back around, we're going to bring it back to root. Because again, that's the same resolution we have here. But again, you could go higher, and again, if you really get good at this, you could just go nuts for hours on end. In any direction at all times. So let's review the whole thing. It's going to go... back to the top, up to first inversion, second inversion, resolve into root, back to third, first inversion down to root, first inversion for D, second inversion for C, back to root for G, second inversion for D. Okay, so that's the whole thing. Let's play along with the track. We still got to get to some lead stuff. Oh man, how time flies. So, here we go. Much faster. First inversion. But you can really start to get creative with the rhythm, as well as, you know, adding other notes around it, like, yeah, whatever. Any notes from each individual Mixolydian scale that fits around it, bueno. Okay, so we're gonna get to some licks now, basically kind of playing over the blues. This first lick in the lead, technically the whole thing starts off on the, which is really just lick number 4 coming to an end. So we'll get back to that one little note right there. We're gonna go to measure 4. This is technically over G7 still, as it leads into the C9, okay? And again, this is basically outline a Mixolydian scale, but a Mixolydian scale with like a flat third. Which is essentially almost like mixing the major and minor blues scale, almost. very, very close. But yeah, basically what we're going to do is, you know, if you notice, here's our G7, but we're going to start on this note, which is a flat third of it. And we're going to just kind of go up. Okay, so you're starting with your middle finger on the 6th fret, going to the ring finger on the 7th fret, coming back down, and then hopping back to your first finger on that 3rd fret. Okay? And all these are all triplets, so except for that very first note. So it's like 1 and 2 and 3 and so at that point you're going index finger, pinky on the 6th fret of the 2nd string, ring finger to the 5th fret on the 2nd string. Then it's going to go to the 3rd fret on that 2nd string before you go 5th fret and 4th fret on the 3rd string. So in total, and that's going to lead there. So what's nice about this is the very last note of that measure is the major third of your 1 chord, right? And then it's going to resolve to here, the B flat, which is their flat 7 of your 4 chord. So, you know, we'll talk about basically when soloing over in blues, although we're not going to really thoroughly figure out all the scale options this week. But you have several options. One, the easiest, it's just like a blues scale. You can totally rock that over the whole thing. It's going to sound great. I'm sure most of you have discovered that. When you're really getting into jazzier blues, though, it's good to know what scales fit over it. So each one of these is a dominant 7 chord. The only time you get a dominant 7 chord is as the 5 chord, which means every time you look at that, if this is G7, most players' brains think we're in the key of G. Technically, I'll give you a partial credit for that for sure. But if you were to pick a major scale that fits over that G7 is naturally found as the 5 chord in the key of C. So even though it says G7, you need to think no sharps, no flats, or the key of C. So, and then when it goes to C7, that C7 is the 5 chord in the key of F, which is 1 flat. So now instead of B's, it's B flat. So instead of, now it's, so again, all these other notes that are around it, those are all the same. It's just one note that's switching every time. And then when it goes to the D7, that's D7 is the 5 chord in the key of G. So ironically, when you get to the 5 chord, you're now finally officially in the key of G or 1 sharp. And so really understanding how those line up will help you create some jazzier lines. So that's kind of what this is pulling from, as we kind of resolve directly on that. And you can even throw the chord in, so it'll be like 1 and 1 and 2 and the 3 and the 4 and the 1, or okay. So let's just hear what that one sounds like in context, shall we? Kind of space out there for a second. I was thinking about something. Let me do that again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 1. Okay. Do it one more time. 2, 2, 3, 4, 1. 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 1. Okay. Or you can technically written with some vibrato there, so you could also do that. You don't have to throw in the chord in, but it's tasty when you can throw some lines and then comp some chords in between, especially if it's just you and a drummer and a bass player. Fills up the sound pretty nice. Plus, you especially as you're just getting going, your ear kind of wants to hear that harmony. So I don't know, it helps. It always helped me solo a little better when I first heard the harmony. The ultimate goal is to be able to solo and know the chord changes and just know your neck of the guitar so well that you're hitting the changes, you're playing the specific chord tones and other notes around it, and know your rhythm so well that no matter where you're at, you can take it out, you can bring it back in, but you hear what the harmony is in your head at all times. Anyway, I'm going to keep going. Lick number 2 is going to come back around on the G chord. Really, it could be played at any point. It's a really hip thing. Technically what you're doing is you're going from the 6th to the flat 7, or tritone, which is actually a half step above the actual tritone on that chord. but it's a little bluesy. It's very great classic jazz cliche. Okay, so what you're doing is ring finger on the 12th fret, middle finger goes to that 11th fret on the second string. You can kind of tweak it up a little bit at the end, little sass. Okay, then you're playing 12 on the third string, 9 on the third string, 12 on the third string, fourth string, just kidding. So you got then 12, 9, 12. Okay, and since this one's easy enough, I'm just going to play it over because it's over a G7, so it'll totally work over the beginning. And I'm just going to keep playing it so you kind of get the idea again. So again, a little faster. Okay, let's give it a shot again. So it's going to go. Even works over C major. Here's where it actually falls. Put it one last time in its place where it belongs. 2, 3, 4. So you get the idea. That one's nice and mellow. Very, very, very jazzy. Great. So that's lick number 2. Lick number 3 is going to start on the end of that 8th measure right there. And it's technically on the 10th fret, but what you're doing is you're sliding into this E shape, so we're going to use our middle finger twice. So it's going to go 10, 11, and then at this point you're kind of walking up the Mixolydian scale. You got 10, 12, 13, 10. Yeah, so it's going in a triplet, so it's 3, 4, and 1. Okay. So again, the index finger on the 10th fret, ring finger on the 12th fret, pinky on the 13th fret. Before resolving the root on the first string on the 10th fret. I'm starting with an upstroke. And then you're just walking right back down. 3, 13, 12, and 10. Up, down, up. Now, it's going to go... It's going to kind of outline the C7 here with that root position. Okay, so you're going flat 3 into the 3rd, down to the 9, root, flat 7, and in context, that's going to go. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, one more time. And then finally, you'll have, you're going to go back to that 13th fret with your pinky, and then you're going to, you could do it with your middle finger and first finger, whatever feels more comfortable. But you technically get back to that 3rd of your G7 chord there. So you're going to go 11 into 12 with either ring finger and middle finger, whichever more is comfortable at that point. So you got slide into 12, then you got 12 over here on the 3rd string, then you're going on the 10 on the 3rd string, then you're going right back up to the 12 on the 3rd string. That's going to finish off that whole number, the 3rd lick. So in total, you got... One more time. Just kidding. Okay, let's play against this. And then the last one is really difficult, but conceptually it's really easy. So we won't have to spend too much time on that, but you're going to need to probably practice it. But luckily, that last lick there is just a straight pentatonic run, so it'll apply really. It doesn't matter what genre you're playing, that's going to sound good no matter where you're at. Let's hear it. So I'm going to play all the licks before that, licks number 1 and 2, 3, 4. Here we go. So we'll wait for it to come around again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. One more time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that's the lick number 3. Yeah, we started at 10 after, so we got a couple more minutes. I'm just going to crank out this last one. Again, if you have any more questions before we're done, kick them over to Royce. Thank you so much for hanging out. Sad that this is over already. It's crazy. But hopefully you enjoyed the course. I got other courses on Jamplay. You got a whole crap ton of other options of really great instructors on jamplay.com. So be sure to check out that stuff. Say hi, Dave Brown's Music on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, all that fun stuff. So just had to get that out before I forget. This last lick is going to be a pentatonic run. So technically you could play it here in this classic position, and all it is it's a 4-note run. So you would start on the 5. I'm just going to demo it in this classic position so you can get the idea, but for me it was easy to facilitate elsewhere. So again, you're just going 4 notes in, starting on this. And so you're just climbing up 4 notes at a time and then going back to the next note in the scale. But I decided that since it's so fast, it's kind of easier to play in this spot right here. So what we're going to do is go to the 12th fret on both the 4th and the 3rd string, 12, 15, 12, 15. And I'm using my ring finger. I would recommend using ring finger for this, even though it could be pinky because it's going to move. Then we're going to move up. We're just going to replace our ring finger with our 1st finger, okay? And then we got 2 more notes. So you got minor thirds here, or 3 frets, and whole steps here, or 2 frets. Then we're going to jump back to this original position. We're going to go 12, 15, 13, 15. Okay, so we got... And then finally, one more thing, we're going to go back to the 15th fret on the 3rd string and finish off this pentatonic run. So again, if you don't... That's the position we're technically in right now, which is the one, I guess it's the 5th position. So you're going... then finally, with an upstroke, 15, 13, 15, 13, 15, before it signs off. So again, one more time. One more time. Okay, but it's... And that's even slower than it is on the record, so... It's going to take some practice to get it under your fingers, but that's the idea. So, I'm going to play it in context, the track a couple times through with all 4 licks, and then I'll say goodbye. But I'll see you on Thursday. Oh wait, today's Thursday. I'll see you on Tuesday for practicing fundamentals. 8 o'clock. Get the idea. 3, 4, 1. 1. Ah, I missed that one. Here we go. I still need practice. 1. Yeah. Do one more time. 1. All right, I think I've overstayed my welcome. It's almost 9:15, past my bedtime here on the East Coast. Guys, I hope you've had fun. I hope you pulled something new out of this, and I don't know. Hope you enjoyed the course. Always a pleasure. Jamplay.com, thanks, and we'll see you soon, unless Royce got something else to say. But if not, Royce, I'm just gonna press play, and I'm gonna kind of jam, and you can fade this story down. Huh? Okay. 1, 2, 3.